What do you guys want? Nothing.
Up in Smoke cost $1 million and grossed $104 million. The studio hated it, a government banned it, critics buried it, and none of that stopped it. Behind the film was a production that broke every rule it could find and invented a genre by accident. These are 12 crazy facts you never knew about Up in Smoke. And the bonus? A scene was filmed for this movie starring a future Hollywood legend, and it was cut before anyone could see it. Dave's not here, man, but the facts are. Number 1, Cheech and Chong had been a comedy team for 10 years before the film and had already sold 10 million albums. By the time Up in Smoke went into production, Cheech and Chong were not a new idea. The two had been working together as a counterculture comedy duo since the late 1960s, approximately 10 years before cameras rolled. In that decade, they had built one of the most loyal followings in American comedy without a single film to their name. No movies, just records and live performances and a reputation that had spread entirely by word of mouth through an audience that the mainstream entertainment industry was not paying much attention to. Before their film debut, they had recorded 5 comedy albums. Those 5 albums had sold more than 10 million copies. 10 million. 4 comedy records. In an era when comedy albums were not exactly a dominant commercial format. Lou Adler, the producer and director of Up in Smoke, had been with them from near the beginning. He discovered Cheech and Chong at a hootenanny night at the Troubadour Club in Los Angeles in the early 1970s. He produced their albums. He built a working relationship with them across years before the idea of a film became serious. When the film did become serious, he was the natural person to direct it, not because he had extensive directing experience, but because he knew the act better than anyone. The film itself was not new material. It was built directly from their stand-up concepts, characters, and bits that had already been tested in front of audiences for years before they were ever written into a screenplay. Pedro and Man had existed long before. Up in Smoke put them on screen. Number 2, Paramount gave them $1 million, then refused to finish paying for it.
It was easy because we basically paid for it ourselves, you know. The studio was just there at the end, you know. We were in partnerships with Paramount.
The path from greenlight to release was not smooth. Paramount Pictures provided an initial budget of $1 million for the production. Filming completed. The rough cut was assembled. Adler brought it to Michael Eisner, Paramount's president at the time, for a look. Eisner was not happy with what he saw, unhappy enough that Paramount refused to invest the additional $800,000 needed to complete the film. The studio that had agreed to finance the project looked at the rough cut and decided it was not worth finishing. Adler finished it himself. He used his own money to cover the remaining costs and then bought the film back from the studio, entirely removing Paramount from the equation and taking full ownership of something they had decided wasn't worth the investment. Then the film was screened. The audience reaction was enthusiastic enough that Eisner reversed his position entirely. Paramount agreed to release the film they had tried to abandon. The studio that refused to put in the final $800,000 to complete it ended up distributing a film that grossed $104 million worldwide. The math on that decision has not improved with time. Number 3, the Tijuana sequence was a guerrilla shoot, no permits, in and out in 90 minutes. Lou Adler's approach to location filming had a philosophy behind it. He stated it directly: get in and get out before they discover you're there. For the Tijuana scenes, the production put that philosophy into full practice. The crew went to Tijuana no permits, no advance arrangements with local authorities, and shot across the street from the historic Hotel Nelson at the intersection of Calle Primera and Avenida Revolution. Total time on the ground, approximately an hour and a half. The payphone Cheech's character, Pedro, is seen talking into during the scene was a proper fake phone the crew brought with them and attempted to affix to the wall using double-sided tape. The tape did not hold. The phone kept sliding down the wall. Marin spent the entire scene with one hand pressed against it, keeping it in place while delivering his lines. If you watch the scene knowing that you can see exactly what is happening and why. Number 4. The car Chong drives at the beginning belonged to Jack Nicholson.
Up in Smoke, that's where my money goes.
The opening of Up in Smoke establishes Tommy Chong's character through the car he drives, a Volkswagen Beetle convertible fitted with a Rolls-Royce radiator grille on the front. An absurd combination. a rich kid toy modified into something stranger. The vehicle communicates everything about the character before he says a word. The car was not a production vehicle built for the film. It belonged to Jack Nicholson. Nicholson's involvement in the film's story does not end with the car. Adler screened the finished film privately for him after completion. Nicholson had just been in a car accident and was dealing with a dislocated shoulder at the time of the screening. The film he watched from that condition was the same film Eisner had tried to kill, and Adler had bought back and finished with his own money. What Nicholson thought of it is not documented. His car is in the opening scene regardless. Number 5. The MPAA forced Paramount to change the ad slogan because it encouraged drug use. The advertising campaign for Up in Smoke ran into a problem before the film even opened. The original slogan was simple and effective. Don't go straight to see this movie. It worked on 2 levels simultaneously, a play on the word straight that any member of the film's target audience would read immediately and correctly. The implication was not subtle. Paramount submitted it to the MPAA for approval. The MPAA passed it. Studio president Jack Valenti was told the phrase meant, "Don't go direct to the theater," a perfectly innocent instruction about not skipping the film on your way to something else. No drug connotation, no problem. Then the parents found out about it. Protests from parent groups alerted the MPAA to the reading they had apparently missed. The organization reversed its approval and forced Paramount to pull the slogan. The replacement they settled on was considerably more innocent. "It will make you feel very funny." The new slogan communicated the same thing in a way that nobody could technically object to. The audience understood it perfectly. The MPAA had successfully replaced one drug reference with another drug reference that was just oblique enough to survive. Number 6. They couldn't get traditional advertising, so they put comic strips on bus benches. The MPAA slogan situation was not the only advertising obstacle the film faced. Getting traditional outlets to promote a film explicitly built around marijuana use was not straightforward in 1978. The conventional channels were not eager to be associated with the content. Cheech and Chong needed to reach their audience through a different route. They created comic strips based on the film's characters and humor, printed and distributed across Los Angeles, left on bus benches around the city, where the audience they were targeting would actually encounter them. The approach worked in ways that conventional advertising could not have replicated. Bus bench comic strips do not look like studio marketing. They look like something that belongs to the street, something discovered rather than sold. For a film built on counterculture credibility, that distinction mattered enormously. The audience that found the strips on bus benches felt like they were in on something. The film opened in 9 theaters in Texas in early September 1978 and grossed $344,785 in its first 10 days. Before its official wide release date, it had already taken in $1.7 million. Word of mouth did the rest. Number 7. The film was banned in South Africa during apartheid. South African censors banned Up in Smoke during apartheid. Their stated concern was that it might encourage young people in the country to take up marijuana smoking. A government censorship apparatus during one of the most repressive political regimes of the 20th century looked at a Cheech and Chong comedy and decided the primary threat it posed was cannabis adoption among teenagers. South Africa was not alone in its disapproval. The U.S. Catholic Conference condemned the film as morally objectionable, placing it in the category of films the conference felt Catholics should not see. Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune gave it half a star. He called it one of the most juvenile, poorly written, awkwardly directed pictures I have ever seen, and put it on his list of the worst films of 1978. Variety called it a mixture of fitful slapstick and toilet humor. The critical consensus was not ambiguous. The film grossed $104 million worldwide. It defined a genre. It built a cult following that has not faded in nearly 50 years. The film that was banned in South Africa in 1978 was selected by the Library of Congress for preservation in the United States National Film Registry in 2024, recognized as culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. Siskel's half-star sits in the permanent American cultural record alongside it. The South African censors were worried about the wrong thing entirely. So was everyone else who dismissed it. Number 8. The film was originally titled The Adventures of Pedro and Man. Before Up in Smoke had a title, it had a premise and 2 characters. The project that eventually became Cheech and Chong's first film was developed under the name The Adventures of Pedro and Man, a title that frames what was being made not as a stoner comedy, but as an episodic road story built around 2 specifically named people. The distinction is worth sitting with. The Adventures of Pedro and Man is a character title. It puts the audience's relationship with Pedro and Man at the center, suggesting that wherever these two go and whatever happens to them is the point, regardless of subject matter. Up in Smoke is a concept title. It tells you what the film is about before you walk in. It also works as a joke, a tone setter, and a description of what happens to the van. Somewhere between development and release, the decision was made to lead with the concept rather than the characters. The film that opened in 9 Texas theaters in September 1978 and grossed $344,785 in its first 10 days was called Up in Smoke. The film that had been developed and written was called The Adventures of Pedro and Man. Both titles describe the same film. Only one of them became a cultural shorthand for an entire genre. Number 9. The snorting scene was achieved with a vacuum cleaner tube hidden in the actress's hand.
We just come in with.
Oh, if you don't mind.
It's not really.
One of the film's most memorable moments involves a character mistaking scouring powder for cocaine and snorting it, a scene that lands entirely on the physical performance of the actress in the moment. The effect was not achieved through editing or camera tricks. A tube connected to a vacuum cleaner was hidden in the actress's hand. When she appeared to snort the powder, the tube did the actual work pulling the substance away while the camera captured the reaction. The audience sees a woman snorting what she believes is cocaine. What was actually happening involved a concealed household appliance. The gap between what the scene appears to be and what it actually required to produce is significant and entirely invisible in the finished film. The performance that resulted was described by at least one critic as one of the funniest single moments in the film. The technical reality behind it was a vacuum cleaner. Number 10. The license plate on Cheech's car was his real license plate. Pedro's car in Up in Smoke has a license plate. The plate reads MUFDVR. It was not a prop. It was not a plate designed for the film by the art department. It was Cheech Marine's actual personal license plate, the plate on his real car at the time of filming. The production put Marine's character in a vehicle bearing Marine's own registration. Whether this was deliberate or simply the path of least resistance is not documented. The result is that every shot of the plate in the film is a shot of something that was simultaneously a piece of production design and a piece of Cheech Marin's actual life. It is one of the smaller details in the film. It is also one of the most purely Cheech and Chong details in the film. The line between the performers and the characters they played was never particularly wide to begin with. Number 11. The film invented the stoner comedy genre, and Siskel gave it half a star. Up in Smoke is credited with establishing the stoner film as a distinct genre. Every weed comedy that followed, Dazed and Confused, Half-Baked, Harold and Kumar, Pineapple Express, operates within a template that this film built. The critics did not see it coming. Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune gave it half a star out of 4. He called it one of the most juvenile, poorly written, awkwardly directed pictures I've ever seen, and placed it on his year-end list of the worst films of 1978. Variety wrote that the film degenerated into a mixture of fitful slapstick and toilet humor. Pauline Kael of The New Yorker was among the few who found it more consistently funny than expected. The film grossed $104 million. It became a cult classic. In 2024, the Library of Congress selected it for preservation in the United States National Film Registry as being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. Siskel's half star is now in the National Film Registry alongside it. Number 12. The film was shot in just over 30 days across Los Angeles, Arizona, and Tijuana. Principal photography on Up in Smoke began May 2nd, 1977 in Los Angeles with a 7-week shooting schedule. The finished film was shot in just over 30 days. The locations covered significant ground. The bulk of filming took place across Los Angeles from Malibu and Venice to Lincoln Heights and Tujunga, using the city as both itself and as a stand-in for locations it was not. Scenes set in Tijuana were a combination of the real Tijuana, where the production spent approximately 90 minutes with no permits, and Los Angeles locations dressed to look like Mexico. Scenes set on the Mexican border were filmed at the actual border in Yuma, Arizona. Director Lou Adler described the production's approach to locations with characteristic efficiency. Get in and get out before anyone discovers you're there. The film that helped define an entire genre of American comedy was assembled across 30-odd days in a city that kept becoming whatever the script needed it to be. Bonus: Harry Dean Stanton filmed a scene as a jail guard who tries to sell acid to Cheech and Chong and was cut entirely. Harry Dean Stanton filmed a scene in Up in Smoke. By 1978, he had appeared in Cool Hand Luke, Kelly's Heroes, and The Godfather Part 2. He was not an unknown quantity. He was a recognizable character actor with a distinctive screen presence that directors had been deploying for over a decade. His role in Up in Smoke was a jail guard. The scene had him attempting to sell acid to Cheech and Chong while they were locked up, a guard trying to deal drugs to two men being held for drug offenses. The comic logic was sound. The casting was right, the scene was filmed. Then it was cut. Stanton went on to Alien in 1979. Then Escape from New York, then Paris, Texas, the performance that made the argument for him as one of the great American screen actors of his generation. His career after Up in Smoke is well documented and widely celebrated. His Up in Smoke scene is not in the finished film. It exists only in accounts of what was shot and subsequently removed. The guard who tried to sell Cheech and Chong acid never made it to the screen, leaving Stanton's connection to one of the most commercially successful comedies of 1978 entirely invisible to anyone who has ever watched it. Up in Smoke wasn't trying to be important. It was trying to make you laugh. And somewhere between the van, the border, and that Battle of the Bands stage, it accidentally invented a genre. Critics dismissed it, censors banned it, and $104 million worth of people showed up anyway. 46 years later, the Library of Congress decided it mattered enough to preserve forever. Pedro and Mon didn't set out to change American comedy. They just couldn't find their stash. Drop a comment and tell us which film we should cover next. Because some movies don't ask for your respect. They just wait until you give it. Far out, man.